In 1999, Mystery Incorporated, consisting of that one guy from Cabin in the Woods, a thirst trap, every jock that became a cop, JonBenet Ramsey if she made it past 6, and the first furry, visited a small town to film a documentary investigating apparent paranormal goings-on in the surrounding forest. They planned to camp out in said forest and document anything they came across. They were never seen again, but the footage they recorded was found by police, and the footage they captured was terrifying. This is the story of the Scooby-Doo Project. Remember the phenomenon that was the Blair Witch Project?
Tell me where you are, John!
The found footage movie about 3 teenagers running around with cameras in the forest until they lose a map and die was not only a commercial success, but also a cultural one. Oh, and spoilers. The stellar marketing, which was one of the first to utilize the internet to its advantage, the world building and lore created, and the film going to the extra mile to appear realistic, led to a cultural atomic bomb. It even convinced people that the events in the film were real. The Blair Witch Project wasn't the first found footage film, but it was the first to gain such popularity. You've got to remember that no one had really seen a movie like this before. It was like one of those America's Funniest Home Video shows, but instead of your racist family getting drunk and falling onto a kitchen utensil, piercing their heart and bleeding out in front of millions of people, it was all, holy shit, there is something in the forest. Here's my snot. Why are you staring at the corner of the wall? And then dead. There are only a few films that reach a cultural pantheon like the Blair Witch Project did, and like everything that reaches cultural relevancy, it was referenced and spoofed by everybody. It was probably even made into a porn parody. Hold on one second. Of course it exists. And here I thought some things were holy and sacred. I'll be right back. Then you have Cartoon Network, the cool kids one-stop shop for badass cartoons about angsty people and endless Hanna-Barbera reruns. Fuck that Nickelodeon bullshit, that shit is for kids, much like Catholic priests. Are you a Catholic priest? Huh? Cartoon Network broadcasts one of the most popular shows in the history of television, Scooby-Doo. It had been around since your parents were still sperm in your grandfather's balls, but unlike your grandfather, Scooby-Doo was still alive and going strong, with new series and spin-offs being released faster than you could even blink. If you somehow don't know, Scooby-Doo was a show where a group of characters named Shaggy, Velma, Fred, Daphne, Scooby, and occasionally this little prick, run around spooky places and solve mysteries related to said spooks. Shenanigans aplenty ensue, such as running through multiple doors, eating dog treats, and unmasking mentally ill people and sending them to jail where they'll never receive any professional help. Rehabilitation? More like take your meds. In October 1999, Cartoon Network scheduled 3 different Scooby-Doo marathons to celebrate the spookiest time of year. Martin Luther King Halloween. But the marathon wasn't going to be the only Scooby-Doo thing going on that month. Cartoon Network wanted some of that special sauce. To spice up the multiple hours of Scooby-Doo being shoved down the throats of your children like a priest's penis, Cartoon Network sprinkled these individual packaging and promotions throughout the marathon. I'm really focusing on priests sexually assaulting children in this video, and I don't know why. Probably some repressed trauma. These packages were created by 3 seasoned animators, Chris Casper Kelly, Larry Morris, and Steve Patrick. Gaze upon these legends, for they are gods amongst humanity. All 3 have a long history in animation, screenwriting, and television that continues to this day. They weren't told they needed to make anything specific, and were basically left to their own devices, as long as the concept they pitched was approved by the higher-ups at Cartoon Network. The gang saw and fell in love with the Blair Witch Project, and I mean, why wouldn't they? It's fucking phenomenal. So when they were approached to make something special for the upcoming marathon, they knew what they wanted to do. Their plan was simple: take the Blair Witch Project and throw in some Scooby-Doo with a hint of satire aimed at both the film and the long-running series. First, they pooled their resources and created a short proof of concept video showing an animated Daphne running through a live-action forest which replicated a scene in the Blair Witch. Instead of making the special entirely animated like the Scooby-Doo show, the crew wanted to have the animated characters composited onto real-world backdrops to emulate the found footage documentary style of the Blair Witch Project, so they could be as faithful to the original original as possible. And the bigwigs at Cartoon Network loved the video, and how the crew composited the animation onto live action really captured the soul of both the Blair Witch Project and Scooby-Doo. So they approved the idea for a satire short. After a few months in development, the Scooby-Doo Project was ready to go. A few parody trailers were released to tease the special, and finally, the Scooby-Doo Project was released onto the unsuspecting young masses through short segments in between episodes of the marathon. In this video, I'll be going into how the Scooby-Doo Project was created and how it was received by fans and critics. But before I do that, I need to give a quick spoiler-filled story summary of the special. If you want to watch the special first and come back, there will be a link in the description. The original version only goes for about 9 minutes, and I know you aren't up to anything important because you're watching this video, so you've got time to watch the special if you wanna. Before we keep going, be sure to like the video if you dig it and subscribe if you want to see more videos about horror games, movies, and odd things that keep people up at night. Now sit down, shut up, put your fucking phone down, Christopher, and let me tell you what happened when 4 teenagers and their dog got lost in the woods. The special begins with some text, just like the original. It states that this is the story of 4 teenage sleuths and their Great Dane who are investigating a mystery about supposed paranormal activity occurring in the forest surrounding a small town. The crew entered the woods and were never seen again. Spooky music plays before a sting in the title card. Cut to Velma, standing at the outskirts of a forest. Like the original, it's filmed like a found footage documentary film, and Velma explains this is what they are filming as she introduces us to the gang. After some jabs at Shaggy's real name,
and that's Norville Rogers.
It's Shaggy!
No wonder he chose to call himself Shaggy. We cut to interviews with people about the woods being haunted and what monsters supposedly stalk them. The crew discusses their findings in the van before interviewing an old lady who really wants them kids to stay out of their woods.
Have you heard these woods are haunted?
You kids stay away!
I mean, look at this face. This is the face of someone who tells you to sit down because she's baked you cookies, and in the same breath complains about minorities decreasing house values in the neighborhood. Shaggy then slams the woman with the coldest insult known to man.
Like I bet she never goes near a dentist either. Shaggy!
This motherfucker should be charged with murder because he's out here killing the elderly. The crew drive out to the woods and recreate one of the most memorable shots of the original film. They rock up to a bed and breakfast for the dead, and Velma tries to explain the curse of the woods.
One spooky night in 1773, some local people from the town escaped because of a ghost
I
story.
can't hear you! I can't hear you!
It is nighttime now, and the gang are putting up their tents to sleep for the night, and I just want to say, the work that went into scenes like this, where animated characters interact with real-world objects, is fucking amazing. They get ready for bed, but before that, Velma takes time to recreate yet another famous scene from the original movie. But instead of it occurring after the main characters have fearfully run through the woods, it happens while Velma is telling a ghost story, so there is a lot less snot. The gang are woken up by monster noises coming from the woods, and Shaggy and Scooby are forced to go outside and investigate. They discuss the legitimacy of pineapple pizza for a bit, which I am sure will light my comments section on fire, before they find themselves back at the dead person bed and breakfast. They hear some more spooky noises, and we get a glimpse of a monster. On brand, Scooby and Shaggy handle this well.
I retreat! We retreat! We retreat!
The video cuts again to the gang yelling out Scooby's name. Apparently he has gone missing, just like that other guy in that movie. And then they say that line.
Scooby-Doo! Where are you? Over here!
Joke's on you though, as Scooby is in the camp. Haha, they just couldn't see him. He is about as dumb as the dog in Bloober Team's Blair Witch, but unlike that game, this movie has left me much less disappointed. After the night of horror, the gang wake up to find someone has piled a bunch of Scooby snacks together in weird shapes. The gang are shaken, but Scooby honestly seems fine with it.
They're all yours, Scooby. Okay. Oh, wait a minute. Did you trick me?
Now they want to get out of the woods and back to the van, but can't figure out where they are. And I swear I am done comparing this to the original. You've seen it, you get the references. This leads to one of my favorite gags in the short, by the way.
You don't know where we are, do you?
I know if we just follow the map.
Can we just figure this out and get home? I'm done with monsters and curses. Give me the map. Like, how can you read this map? It's just a dotted line and an X. Let's just keep moving.
They think they found a clue, but it's just their own footsteps, which means they've been walking in circles. Velma and Fred get into an argument because the map is missing and Shaggy reveals a horrible truth.
I don't have the map!
I ate it, man. Scooby and I ate it with Tabasco.
Yeah, Rabasco.
It was like useless anyway.
The gang continues to argue as they have been lost in the woods for a while, and Fred is definitely handling it well.
I'm always calm, man. I'm the calm one. I'm calm.
Night falls and more spooky shit begins to happen, so the gang run for it before stumbling on a haunted house, which appears to be where the monster noises are coming from. And yeah, they find a monster. The gang run around and make some jokes that take jabs at the Scooby-Doo series.
Oh, I hate this part with the doors.
A monster chases them, and Velma runs downstairs to find Shaggy standing in a corner. The monster appears again and it cuts to black before a missing persons poster with the gang on it comes on screen and a news report plays in the background.
Search parties have spent several days searching the woods and found hundreds of Scooby snacks, but no trace of the teenage sleuths have been found.
After the special aired and the marathon concluded, the segments were re-aired with some extra scenes that were cut from the original, and a few of those I found pretty interesting. One I particularly liked was a scene set in an abandoned drive-in theatre the gang comes across in the woods. Shaggy and Scooby look for a snack bar and begin to eat some candy. Velma would have exclaimed that the candy is 30 years old, but those scenes didn't make it into the final cut. In another, a mystery something is going through the gang's backpacks, and there is an appearance by this prick,
Hiya, gang.
who the gang don't seem too excited to see,
Hi, Scrappy.
which is the correct reaction to stumbling across this snivelling little shit. This version also featured an extended ending where the crew unmask the monster and reveal his true identity and motives, but there is a shocking twist.
But why did you scare us at the cemetery last night?
Well, if you didn't do it, then who?
The full version with all of its cut scenes is nearly 3 times as long, which shows how passionate the team were about creating this thing. I've linked the extended version in the description as well, but now I want to tell another story. The tale of how the Scooby-Doo Project was created. You better like the sound of my voice, because we are going to be here for a little while longer. The creation of the special is as interesting as the special itself, because making something where there was a blend of animation and live action wasn't something easily done in 1999, especially when you remember just how small the team was who were making the special and how tight their deadline was as well. After they showed Cartoon Network the short proof of concept scenes with the live action and animation put together, their project was given the green light and they began production in July in Georgia. Cartoon Network gave the crew a tight deadline and a very limited budget, so they couldn't do anything too crazy, just semi-crazy. There were all kinds of methods the crew used to keep costs low, but vomiting all of that into this section would make a bulimic person say, now that's a bit much. The script was written with plans to cut the special into smaller segments that would air before and after episodes and during commercial breaks during the marathon. Each episode would end with a cliffhanger to incentivize the viewers to keep watching the marathon so they could get the whole story of the Scooby-Doo Project.
We are now leaving the van and going into the woods.
Hi, Van. Like, why do we have to always do these things when it's almost dark?
Cheeky little clever fuckers. With the script all good to go, the crew moved on to getting the voice acting sorted out, but there was a problem. The main voice cast of Scooby-Doo were busy doing voice work for Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island in Los Angeles, so they weren't able to travel to Georgia and record their lines for the Scooby-Doo Project. But luckily, there is this technology that existed called a telephone. Now, I have watched Ellen, so I know every kid nowadays is fucking stupid and doesn't know what a telephone is.
Okay, so I need to spin. Okay. There's a lot of 8. 8?
The crew called the voice actors and recorded them as they read their lines over the phone. Other Cartoon Network employees also provided voice work for the special, like for the journalist shouting questions at the police officers during the news conference advert. They decided early on that besides the Scooby Gang and one other character, everything else would be live action, which included the environments and people. That also meant the famous mystery machine that Scooby and his mates drove around in all the time, solving mysteries. That van is one of the most iconic aspects of the franchise, so the crew making the special knew they couldn't make the Scooby-Doo Project without it. Who would chauffeur around a bunch of crazy teenagers rambling about mysteries and having back and forth conversations with a dog? No one. That's who.
There it is! Whole gang, chill, drug addicts. Chill. Whole gang full of drug addicts.
They needed a real mystery machine. There was just one problem. Where the fuck would they get one? They could steal someone's van and paint it, but you'd never know what kind of shit you'd find inside. Probably some candy, cigarette butts, a police scanner, and loads of rope and leather, but not the fun 50 Shades of Grey kind. So instead of stealing a van full of stuff later used as evidence in a crime, they tracked down a van that was already made up to look like the mystery machine that was being used during a promotional tour in Canada. You know, that place Americans constantly bag out despite it being a better place to live if you value stuff like, I don't know, basic human rights, public health care and education. Oh, and bears. The crew flew to Canada and filmed the scenes for the special involving the mystery machine in just one day. Filming live action and combining it with animation is the most impressive part of this special from a technical standpoint. In traditional animation, figuring out how to have the characters in a location isn't really a concern. It's animation, so the animators can just make the backgrounds from scratch and put the characters on top of it. If they need to cut or zoom on a specific character or thing, they can just alter the background accordingly. I've really simplified the process and made it sound super easy, which it isn't, but I have spent so much time on this part of the script trying to make it make sense that I'm fucking over it. This is good enough. But to remove the backgrounds and replace them with live action, that is when things get complicated. Throw in the idea of shooting the special in found footage style, and my brain melts at the idea. When filming, how are you going to know where the characters will be? How will you know to move the camera from focusing on one character to another? What if the background is moving? And since it's found footage, one character will be holding a camera and moving. So how will you be able to keep that in mind while also focusing on other characters or things that they are reacting to? So many fucking questions, and all of these and more needed to be answered by the crew creating the special, but the Mad Lads did just that.
All I'm saying is that there's got to be a perfectly good explanation for all this.
Filming took place between July and September in Atlanta. How shots were choreographed with animation in mind was done with the use of dots. These dots were placed in locations such as on the passenger side window of the mystery machine to signify where the animated characters would be. They would then play the voice work done by the cast from a tape recorder to further help the shots flow and make sure they moved and cut when they needed to. Sometimes the voice work or script wasn't ready, so the crew filming that day would have to improvise lines and pretend they were the characters just to get the shots they needed that day.
Scooby, that bump isn't even funny. That's what I said, not funny.
Then the characters were composited over these black dots, and voila, you've mixed animation with live action.
That's what I said. Rat.
Cat.
Rat.
Even though they had this method, sometimes it wouldn't work, such as when a dot couldn't be placed on a scene, or if there was character movement, such as a hand picking up Scooby snacks, or someone running through the woods. So the crew would have to stand in for the animated characters. Using the Scooby snack example, the original shot had a crew member picking up the Scooby snacks. Then they would composite Scooby's paw over the hand so it looked like he was picking up the snacks. Pretty big brain move if I don't say so myself. The crew had to tackle more problems when it came to shooting scenes in the dark, and also how they were going to light them. Since a lot of the Blair Witch Project took place at night or had people running around, they knew they had to get really creative. A lot of footage shot at night was done by one of the creators, Larry Morris, filming in the woods by himself. He would need to make sure to keep in mind of where characters would be and at what time while running through the woods in the dead of night. That shit is pretty fucking impressive. I can't even find the G-spot, let alone blindfolded and in a forest. The forest part is particularly hard. There's sticks and dirt everywhere. Sometimes it's like that one scene out of The Evil Dead, but with less coming. Shots with an emphasis on lighting, such as characters using a torch, required the crew to actually pose where the characters would be, so they could determine how the lighting would bounce off them and animate accordingly. Another time, when replicating the most famous scene in the movie, they used a board held above a flashlight to see how the light would reflect off it so they could replicate the light of the scene accurately in the special. They had to keep costs low, so they had to use techniques to try and reduce the animation budget as much as possible. Cheeky techniques they employed were to animate all of the characters from their back. They also reduced how many times the characters needed to flap their lips by using those shots over and over again. Once they had the footage, the crew would color grade the night footage with a flashlight effect and 16mm black and white scratch effects at Turner Studios to replicate the handheld camera style of the Blair Witch Project. One aspect that really sold it as authentic in the eyes of many people besides the use of found footage were the fake interviews conducted with the townspeople of Burkittsville. In the original, the main characters interviewed people from the town and asked them about the town's history, the Blair Witch, and any spooky goings on. They were a really clever idea of selling the idea that this film is made from the perspective of characters making a documentary. The crew making the Scooby-Doo Project knew they needed to replicate these interviews with their own twist, if they wanted their parody to be as faithful to the original's documentary style as possible. After finishing work for the day, the creators would drive up to Casper County in Wyoming, where one of the creators' parents lived, to film their interviews. It had everything they needed: small town, forest, people, that's about it. The mockumentary interviews were filmed in Casper on mini DV in the parents' neighborhood. They asked whoever was down to be interviewed. This was friends, their parents, who are right there. Look at these cuties. It must be nice having two parents and not one parent and a corpse. Or they would get randoms who they needed to fit a particular role, such as this crazy old lady. Fun fact, they had to get a black texter and colour her teeth so it looked like they were missing. According to the behind the scenes video, the final sequence was the most fun to shoot, but it was also the hardest to composite together. Getting access to a house for shooting was easy. One of the creators, Larry Morris, lived in the house used in the final sequence. He brought up the house for use because he remembered one of the hallways on the second floor of the house would work perfectly for that classic Scooby-Doo doorway chase that is used in many of the episodes of the show. But what made filming this section so difficult was that the camera being held by Larry needed to mimic one of the characters. They had to enter and move through the house, focusing on specific things or characters for specific moments of time, executing the hallway scene and ending up in the basement for the finale. What made this even more difficult was no tracking points were used, so the camera person needed to remember exactly where characters were and would be in a sequence. But Larry executed it flawlessly. Everything in the final scene needed to be animated frame by frame. They said this was extremely hard to do in 1999. Funnily enough, the easiest part of the shoot was the hallway chase. This was because they positioned the camera in the hallway from an angle that hid most of the doors in the hallway except one. And all the crew needed to do for that one door in frame was to open and close it on cue. That made animating the characters running through the hallway very easy to shoot and animate. The last part of the house sequence is replicating the famous ending of the original, that being a person standing in a corner of the basement and something hitting the camera person. When the crew saw that ending, they all knew that Shaggy had to be the one standing in the corner of the cellar, and luckily for them, Larry's house had a perfect cellar. The final scene that was filmed was the fake missing persons news conference that would be used to advertise the special. This was filmed in a Cartoon Network conference room by the cafeteria in the middle of a workday. The deputy police officer seen in the background of some of the scenes was played by a programming executive who had worked on several Cartoon Network shows. And with that, they were done. The first scene that was composited was the scene where Daphne is running and screaming in the forest. In the behind the scenes video for the special, the gang said they were unsure whether the idea of mixing live action with animation would work, but after they saw this composited scene, they knew they were onto something really cool. Once all the footage, animation, and voice work were finished, the project was pieced together at Turner Studios in Atlanta, who worked on the majority of the Hanna-Barbera Productions library. But as the team were putting together the Scooby-Doo project, they were hit with intense panic. It seemed everyone else decided to spoof the Blair Witch Project for fall TV premieres on other networks. Some of those competing projects beat the Scooby-Doo project to air. The team were terrified that all their hard work would be a massive flop. I mean, putting Scooby-Doo together with the Blair Witch Project is a pretty crazy idea. Thankfully, the team's minds would be put at ease after the special aired on Cartoon Network. Luckily for the team, media outlets reported on the Scooby-Doo project after it aired in October, and said it was one of the best takes on spoofing the popular film. Critics praised the special for being one of the only Blair Witch specials that was actually funny, but also kept the scary heart of the original film. Others praised the combination of animation and live action footage, saying it meshed together surprisingly well. One of my favourite quotes from these reviews is from Vanity Fair, where they said the special reproduced the original film so faithfully that there was no reason to see the dull original. Fucking ouch. Shaggy isn't the only one out here murdering people. In fact, it was so well received that the executives over at Cartoon Network Programming agreed to play the whole special in its completion at the end of the last night of the Scooby-Doo Marathon. But that wasn't the end of the success for the Scooby-Doo Project. In 2000, the special won Outstanding Animation Special Project at the Annie Award, which are awarded by the Los Angeles branch of the International Animated Film Association and ASIFA Hollywood, which is a pretty big fucking deal, and it's awesome to see a passion project getting such high accolades. You'd think that considering how well received the Scooby-Doo Project was, and the fact it won a fucking award, that Cartoon Network would have released the special on its own on DVD, or something, but nope. It has never received an official release, and in fact, after it aired, the special has never been run on the channel again. Luckily, you can find the original special and the extended version here on YouTube, which are both linked in the description so you can check them out for yourselves. Despite Cartoon Network never re-airing or physically releasing the special on its own, the Scooby-Doo Project has lived on through various forms and specials. The original generic animation made for the special were reused in projects long after it aired. Shots of Scooby-Doo were reused numerous times during the Cartoon Campaign 2000, and during the halftime show of Big Game Roadrunner vs. Coyote, footage of Fred from the special was featured prominently. They even did a little skit after technical issues occurred during the big game. It cut to Fred and Malta from Space Ghost Coast to Coast, having a conversation about random shit. Malta questions Fred about the reception of the Scooby-Doo Project.
So let me get this straight. You're in the woods.
Right.
And you're lost.
Uh-huh.
And you're taping it.
Yep.
And they said it was just another tired rip-off of the Blair Witch Project?
I know.
Man, that hurts.
Tell me about it.
He also questions Fred about whether he screwed Daphne or not, Malta asking Fred if he smashes Daphne is peak early 2000s Cartoon Network. But you know he hasn't. That ascot would make any woman as dry as the desert during a heat wave. Or when I tell girls I make YouTube videos about Scooby-Doo on the internet. The success of the Scooby-Doo Project convinced Cartoon Network that doing this parody shit was a good idea. So on October 31st, 2001, they created a special that Wikipedia describes as a comedic parody of the typical episode of the new Scooby-Doo movies, titled Night of the Living Doo, which is obviously a reference to the iconic zombie film Night of the Living Head, which you can watch for free on spankbank.com. It too was broadcast in small segments during commercial breaks of a Halloween Scooby-Doo marathon, and aired in its entirety after it was finished. Both Chris Kasper-Kelly and Jeffrey Olsen, who created the Scooby-Doo Project, also wrote and directed this special. If there is enough information on it, I may end up covering Night of the Living Doo as well, or maybe I never will. Only those in the future will know. The Scooby-Doo Project is something that is truly special. It was created by a team of people full of love and passion for the Scooby-Doo series and the Blair Witch Project, and it shows in every single frame of the special. It not only captures the essence of both the franchises, but still manages to take the piss out of itself from time to time. In hindsight, the concept is an obvious one. Scooby-Doo can really match with most types of horror media, but what elevates the Scooby-Doo Project above just being a lazy money grab parodying something popular is the dedication of the crew behind it and their talent, attention to detail, and drive to make something great. I wanted to share with you not only the story the special told, but the story of those behind it and how they worked so hard to create it. And I hope I've done a good job of that. The Scooby-Doo Project may not have been as impactful or culturally relevant as the Scooby-Doo IP or the Blair Witch Project, but it didn't need to be. It was a love letter to both, made by some of the most talented creators working at Cartoon Network. And I think they achieved their goal of making something that for those who will remember it, it will go down in history as one of the best pieces of animation ever created.
Ruby van was found beside a dirt road. Search parties have spent several days searching the woods and found hundreds of Scooby snacks, but no trace of the teenage sleuths have been found.
Thank you as always for Cassie Clower for editing this video. You can find her on Twitter. Thank you so much for watching as well. It means the fucking world to me. And if you like this video, be sure to do all that shit YouTube wants you to do, and subscribe if you want to see more videos about horror games, movies, and weird shit. And remember, as always, stay spooky.